For most teams, it's the end of their November internationals and they want to finish with a bang. My name's Mark, let's talk rugby. As said, it's the final week of Autumn Internationals or November Internationals or Autumn Nation Series, whatever way you want to term it. For the bulk of the teams, the outliers are Ireland and Australia, who are playing again next week, but every other team, pretty much their campaign finishes this week. So we're going to go down quickly through each of the games, talk about how the teams have gone so far in the November campaign and how I think the game is going to go. So I'm going to start with Friday the 22nd of November, and it's France versus Argentina. This is in the Stade de France in Paris. Kickoff time is 8:10 p.m. if you're in Ireland or the UK, and 9:10 p.m. local time. So France, they started with that big win against Japan 52-12, then that 1 point win against New Zealand, decent performances in both of those as well. And we're seeing them, mix things up as well. They're not sticking to the same team either, which I think is important because, they've done, I think in terms of the two Northern Hemisphere teams that were up there at the top of the rankings coming into this, I think they've done a much better job in terms of using their player squads and their depth than Ireland have. And, Andy Farrell-Bamone's not having the players to pick from, but he's not picking them, so how does he know, honestly? But yeah, I think France have done well. Argentina, they've been decent as well. That big win in Italy, 50 points to 18. You think back, like these two teams you would have considered to be kind of on a similar level, but Argentina, since they've joined the Rugby Championship, really have gone up at least a level compared to Italy in that time. You can see that with that really big win there, and Italy had a very strong team in that game as well. It wasn't like they were missing a lot of frontline players as well. Then that narrow defeat against Ireland in Dublin, at the Aviva Stadium, 22 points to 19. They definitely should have won that game, and yeah, I think they're the better of the two teams. Overall, Ireland started well, but Argentina, the better team for much of the game there. So this one's going to be an interesting one because you've got two teams who are coming into this pretty much on decent form. Argentina had a really good, rugby championship, just about missed out on the title to South Africa, although definitely South Africa were deserved winners, but Argentina very close, much closer to them than they were to any other teams. New Zealand disappointing in that, but Argentina, winning over there in Wellington, absolutely destroyed the Wallabies in one of the games as well. Beat South Africa in one game too by a single point. And then you have France as well, who were the big contenders with Ireland for the Six Nations as well. So it's kind of the two runners-up really facing off from the North and South hemispherical competitions. So, looking at this one here, it's a tough one to call, honestly, because you look at it and you think, okay, well, France are going to win it because France, one of the top four teams in the world, but Argentina are right behind them. Argentina are number 5 in the world. They're doing really well at the moment, and you have to kind of think about it as well. I'm just going to give me a second, going to pull up the world rankings here, and just confirm things. Yeah, so you got Argentina there, like. France on 88.08 there. So they're about 2 behind New Zealand, who are in third. And then Argentina on 85.4, just 2.6 behind them. So, the distance between New Zealand and France is just a little bit less than the distance between France and Argentina. Then Argentina with a decent, buffer over Scotland as well, down there in 6th on 82.7. So Argentina deservedly in the top 5 in the world, and their performances have been so good. But you think France at home in Paris. I remember, I was at the 2007 Rugby World Cup where Argentina were a really big surprise package there. And unfortunately for me, being an Ireland fan, we were in the same pool as France and Argentina. Lost both of them. Argentina went on. I think did they make a semi final or something in that one? But and France obviously knocked out New Zealand as well in that one as well. But Ireland just got kind of ambushed in that. I remember going and we are told, oh, it's the best Ireland team we've ever had, the best prepared, and blah blah blah. I'm sure a lot of fans can kind of relate to that. That you're going in with all the optimism, and then it just doesn't happen, and that's what happened, unfortunately, to us in that one. But yeah, Argentina were fantastic then, but have to look at this game here. Who do I think is going to win between these two? And I think it's just that factor of France at home. And honestly, I think that it's going to be a higher scoring game than it was in Dublin. I don't think it's going to be as tight as it was. It's going to be a bit loose, but that's going to suit both teams. I think both, pretty good at running the ball, pretty good at exploiting, turnovers as well. And so I think the score is kind of going to yo-yo a little bit between the two teams and going to be a bit of back and forth. But I think in the end, France are going to come out on top in that one. Okay, so on to the next game then. So that was our Friday game. On to the Saturday games then. First up, we have Ireland. So Saturday 23rd. Jeez. Tongue-tied there, 23rd of November, Ireland versus Fiji at the Aviva Stadium, or Lansdowne Road as it used to be called, in Dublin. Kick-off 3:10 p.m. local time. So, Ireland haven't been brilliant, honestly. This autumn series, Fiji have looked decent. Apart from that game against Scotland, where they got absolutely destroyed. But you have to think about that in terms of they didn't have any of their French-based players, available for that one. So that scoreline of 57-17, bit skewed because of that. I still think Scotland probably should have, or probably would have won the game if they had all their front line available to them, but it would have been a lot closer. And then they went and beat Wales in Cardiff as well. After that, 24 points to 19. So Fiji in decent form. We saw them doing well in the Rugby World Cup too, and they won the Pacific Nations Cup as well. So really good year for them against Ireland, Six Nations champion. Stuttered a lot during this autumn series. They did have that drawn series in South Africa as well, but the Ireland team playing at the moment is a shadow of the side, that played in there, even though it's a lot of the same personnel. And I think part of the problem is that it's been a lot of the same personnel. Ireland have made changes for this finally. We're seeing Prendergast having a start there. Who else? There's Gus McCarthy is starting at hooker as well, and they've mixed things up a little bit as well in the rest of the team. So about 6 changes, I think, from the Argentina game. Would have liked to have seen more than that, but Farrell did say that he wasn't going to make as many changes as maybe people expected. We'll talk a little bit more about this game, because I'm going to do a full review after I record, or preview, sorry, after I record this. So we're not going to go too in depth into the teams on that one. But yeah, Ireland, lost New Zealand first up. Pretty abject in that. New Zealand weren't great either, but Ireland definitely the poorer of the two sides. Then against Argentina, started well, fell away, and didn't score any points for wherever it was, 45 minutes or the last 45 minutes of the game or something like that. And they were lucky that Argentina were going for the win at the end there instead of taking the points to get a draw as well. So very lucky to get with a win on that one. So hopefully, and it is hopefully, honestly, as an Ireland fan, that the new blood in there will inject some kind of, some urgency into the team, and yeah, it's honestly, as an Ireland fan, it's a tough one to call, because I look at it, I think Ireland have been so bad. I can definitely see Fiji winning this one. I hope, and it is again hope, that those new guys in there can give Ireland just a kick up the ass, and maybe they can produce a performance. And it seems that for Ireland, that when they change the team significantly between Rugby World Cups, because they hardly ever do it during a Rugby World Cup, but when they do it in between, a lot of those players actually do step up and perform very well, and then they kind of disappear because they don't get a chance again. So I'm actually thinking that this one, Ireland are going to win. It's not going to be as comfortable as Scotland won. It's definitely going to be a tough game for them. I think they're going to concede, at least 20 points in the game. If it feels like that. So, Ireland are going to have to be on it. They're going to have to take their chances, but I think they will in this one. Prendergast at 10, and then I think they got Osborne in there as well. And given those guys coming in wanting to impress, I think Ireland will take out the victory, but it's going to be tough work for them. Next, then we have Wales versus South Africa. It's at the Principality Stadium in Cardiff. Kickoff is 5:40 p.m. Ireland and UK time. So, Wales absolutely dire. So far, they lost 24-19 to Fiji, and then after that, then absolutely destroyed by Australia, 52 points to 20. And Australia got a 20-minute red card as well. And something, actually, just think about that coming back to Ireland. Bealham, again, I'll say it again, I said it in my match review, but Bealham should have got a 20-minute red card as well for Ireland, and I don't know why he didn't, honestly. But yeah, Wales against 14 men for 20 minutes. They lost that period 21 points to nil. And that's how bad things are for them at the minute. And there's talk of will Gatlin go and etc. And then people looking at a selection for this one, putting Costello back in at 10. And for me, like, Costello has been decent in the URC for Scarlets. I know for Wales he hasn't been that great, and it didn't help that he threw an intercept pass for a try as well against Australia either. But he's not as bad. He's not as bad as people are making out. People that are kind of bagging on him. I'm not saying he's amazing like that. He's fully up to test standard, but at the same time, he's nowhere near as bad as people are making out. But there's also talk about Warren Gatland. Is he going to go? Is he going to stay? I think he's definitely going to stay. I think until the Six Nations, and the reason I think that is because the WRU cannot afford to pay out his contract. I've seen the number bandied about. He's on 600,000 a year. He's got like 3 years left on his contract, so that's like 1.8 million to pay out the rest of his contract, and they're already strapped for cash. I don't think they're going to be able to do that. So it's up then to Warren Gatland to decide when he goes, I think. Unless South Africa are up there in 70, 80 points on them, then he'd just have to go out of embarrassment. I think the WU, whether he decided to go or not, would have to make him go at that point. But if it's even similar scoreline to Australia, I don't think he's going to go. I think he's definitely going to get the next Six Nations. I've talked about before that I don't think it's the right thing for him to be back in Wales in the first place, and I felt like that Wayne Pivac was very much hounded out of the job, whereas Gatlin is getting a lot of leeway compared to the way especially fans were in terms of wanting Pivac out. But you can understand as well, he's a legend in Welsh rugby. He delivered 3 Grand Slams and a title on top of that as well. So 4 Six Nations titles, 2 World Cup semi-finals. You look at that and you think, yeah, the guy's got plenty of credit in the bank, but 11 defeats in a row, a record for Wales, has eroded a lot of that goodwill that he had before. We're expecting this obviously to be 12 in a row unless there's some kind of miracle almost. You can never say never, right? But for some things, you'd be waiting a long time. But then look at their opponent, South Africa, right? They started off with that. They played Scotland first, right? And they were under pressure at times against Scotland, but Scotland couldn't take the chances, and then just ease away in the end. Then close game against England, but again they had that that finish. England weren't able to get back within a score, and then they were able to kind of see the game out there as well. So and South Africa, they've talked about now trying to have the two best for like 15s in the world in the same squad. So that's what they're trying to do in terms of develop depth. And again, as an Ireland fan, it's a big contrast to the way Ireland have been doing, where it's basically pick the same 15 almost all the time. And we're seeing as well that South Africa, players that, if you're a URC fan, if you watched anything on my channel, I have a lot of admiration for a lot of the South African URC teams and the players that play for them that hadn't up until recently represented the Springboks as well. That there's that huge depth of talent there. And you look at players who hadn't been capped, and you're thinking, this guy is fantastic. And there's tons of them there as well. And then they have all the players that are playing in England, and players playing over in Japan as well, and other places around the world too. Like they've got huge pool of players, but quality players as well to pick from. It's not like England, where they have a lot of England, I feel, have a lot of good players, but are missing, that kind of top of their pyramid, as it were, where the cream of the crop should be. Where South Africa seem to be top heavy in terms of just the quality of the players to have running around at the moment. But given that whole thing, you've got to think it's a South Africa win, and it's more a case of what's the margin going to be like, and is the margin going to be enough for Gatland to go or not? I think that's the big thing for people. Personally, as a rugby fan, I hope Wales don't get embarrassed in this. They're. I remember Ireland being terrible and Wales being kind of the big team in terms of the Celtic nations, or like the even the home nations, like the Lions nations, as it were. Back when Gatland was there first time around, and I don't like to see teams kind of be down in the doldrums like that, and especially for the fans as well. Like people, rugby fans, you want them to be enjoying their rugby. You don't. I don't like to be reading comments where people are saying, "Oh, I've followed Wales my whole life, but now I can't, stick following them." And some people say, "Oh, they're not loyal or whatever." But the thing is, it just kind of grinds you down, honestly. You see your team losing, test after test after test. And then, you look in the URC as well, especially like this season, they've got teams, I think it's 6th and 8th at the moment. But you look, other than the Ospreys last year, for years now, like, in the URC, and then the Pro 14 before that, like, they're not getting anywhere. You wondering, what's happening with their game, etc. It really can get you as a fan. So I just hope that there are brighter times ahead for Wales, and whether that's with or without Gatland. But South Africa, fantastic team. Huge respect for them as a rugby nation, and really enjoy the way they play the game as well, because I think. They're a team that can play in multiple different ways. They can use the power, they can use that pace, they can use, the link up between the backs and the forwards as well to hurt teams. And I think Wales are going to see a lot of each of those elements, unfortunately for them, on Saturday. And it's going to be South Africa win. Should be a comfortable win for them. And again, it's probably about how much. Next then, Italy versus New Zealand. It's at the Allianz Stadium in Turin. Kickoff is 8:10 p.m. UK and Ireland time, 9:10 p.m. local time. So, this one, it's kind of a repeat of the World Cup. Italy with a chance to kind of, regain a bit of pride, because in the World Cup against both, New Zealand and France, heads went down. on the Italy side, and they pretty much gave up. You could see it; they gave up in the games, and especially against New Zealand, and shipped a big score. And that's not nice to see from a team that I've watched kind of grow and improve, and then suddenly it felt like they went backwards in the World Cup. Then they took another step forward again in this year's Six Nations, but again this. This autumn series, they've felt like they've gone back again. They're taking a step back. If you look at against Argentina, 50 points, 18 at home, losing there in Udine. Against an Argentina team that they would have felt like they should have been competitive against, even though, as we talked about, Argentina, deservedly fifth in the world, but still Italy at home, got to have the pride there, and you got to put a bit more up than they did in that one. Then they played Georgia, and just about squeaked out with a win, 20 points to 17. In Genoa. In that one, and now this is kind of their end of their campaign, and I don't think anyone thinks they're going to win, but it's about playing with pride, right, and sticking in the game for longer than they did in the World Cup, and not getting humiliated in this one. New Zealand, for their part, it's been a decent tour. Like when you look at it, they had first up that close win against England, then a more comfortable win against Ireland, even though they still didn't look great in that one. Certainly looked improved against France, but that was a narrow loss for them there. And now in this one, you feel like they're just going to cut loose, and a lot of the players, New Zealand are one of those teams where, because of the depth that they have, kind of similar to South Africa, even when they make changes, they can still put a big score on teams. And that's what Italy, you've got to, be wary of, is that, they've got to be competitive. And then when New Zealand have the purple patch, they have to try and limit the score that they're going to put up on them. But I think it's definitely going to be a New Zealand win in that one. And, the margin should be closer than Wales versus South Africa. But we'll have to see, because Italy, again, haven't looked that great, and only the fact that Wales have looked worse than them, we might be talking about Italy, being poor instead at this point. So yeah, it's definitely going to be a New Zealand win in that one. On to the Sunday games then, 2 games on the Sunday. So first up is Scotland versus Australia. It's at the Scottish Gas Murrayfield Stadium in Edinburgh. Kickoff 1:40 p.m. Ireland, UK time. So, looking at this, you got Scotland, that really big win against, Fiji. And then they played South Africa. Didn't take their chances against South Africa, and then it was how so many games between Scotland and the likes of South Africa, Ireland, and New Zealand have gone in recent years, where they look good for a period, and then the game just drifts away from them, and they don't have a response to come back. Whereas if it's England or teams like that in that kind of bracket, they do have the response and are able to come back and get over the top, but they don't seem to be able to do it against those teams. And, with Australia, it's kind of been, back and forth between them over recent years. So I think this is going to be a good measure of where the Scotland team are, and also of where Australia are too. Australia, you look at, their results, so far. They had that, the win against England, looked really good in that one, especially being able to produce that final play, to score the win and try, and not make, an error and kind of blow the game. That was a big step forward for them. And then that really big win against Wales last week as well. So now they've got 2 games left. They're looking to do like a sweep of the home nations. If they win this one against Scotland, then they'll be going into that game against Ireland, feeling like it's definitely on, that Ireland are there to be taken. So this I think is the big hurdle for them. If they get the win here, then they'll have the confidence that they need to go to Dublin and really put in a performance. And then Scotland as well. Again, it's a test for them in terms of we've seen the players against Portugal and Fiji scoring tons of tries. They didn't do it against South Africa, and now it's a case of, okay, can you do it now against Australia? So I think this is going to be back and forth kind of game. It's going to be probably similar to England versus Australia, and it's hard to pick it honestly because first of all, I like the Scots anyway. And I'm a Northern Hemisphere fan, so in these games, I generally cheer for the Northern Hemisphere team. But then you have Australia. I've got connections with them. I talked about before how I've written in the past articles on Six Nations games and stuff for one of the Australian fan sites in the past. And did that for a while and kind of was in that community for a long time as well. And also then we have the Joe Schmidt connection with Australia as well. And obviously I wanted him to do well because of everything that he did for Irish rugby. Still don't want him to come back a la Gatlin though. But still, I want to see him do well. But on this one, I'm going to go for a Scotland win, but it's going to be a very tight margin. Then the final game of the weekend is England versus Japan. It's at the Allianz Stadium in Twickenham. I don't know why, like every other stadium, they tell you what city it's in. But for the Allianz Stadium, because it used to be Twickenham now, they're using Twickenham instead of London. But kickoff is 4:10 p.m. And this one, it's an old coach going back to their old stomping ground. We're going to see that with Joe Schmidt going back to Ireland next weekend. And now this is, Eddie Jones going back to England. And again, kind of like Gatland, don't go back is the thing. Like Japan haven't been great since they've been back there. They've been talking about how, they're going to play super fast rugby, and just catch teams on the hop, etc. But I don't know whether, because Japan before anyway played, a really fast game anyway. It's about whether they have the skills to execute it and whether they have the stamina to keep it up as well. There's no point in blowing yourself out after 20 minutes and then England just steamroller over the top of you. So we'll have to see how that goes and how it's going to go in the long term for Japan as well. With England, Borthwick, another coach under pressure. He's had 3 games, this autumn series, and he's lost all of them. I don't think he's seriously in trouble for his job at the minute. And I think he will definitely get the Six Nations to go on from there because there are green shoots coming from that, especially the fact that Marcus Smith now is getting a run of games at 10. And if he can kind of stick with that and just kind of adapt their play around the way Smith works as well. And, I think Smith is kind of similar to kind of, the way you see with Scotland. You've got to make your system with a Maverick 10. You got to make your system fit the fit the 10, rather than the other way around. When it's a Maverick like that you can't be forcing someone like Smith to just fit into the English system. And I talked about that a little bit, how the way they attack, it kind of allows him to make those decisions and kind of, not necessarily go off script, but it's kind of part of the script for him to do stuff like that. But I think they still need to adapt a little bit more in terms of, we've seen him individual skills, making breaks and then setting up players, but we haven't really seen him unlocking defenses by putting players through gaps and stuff like that. So still a lot more to work on there, but the fact that he's there, it seems to be now that he's their 10, and I hope that they don't change, because they need to back him now, and for good or bad, and just see how it's going to go through the Six Nations with him at 10. But as I talked about, they had 3 close losses. 22-24, they lost at home to New Zealand. Then that 37-42 last play of the game, lost to Australia. And then a bit of a wider margin, 20 points to 29 at home against South Africa as well. So gonna want to finish on a win here. They should really finish on a win, because you look at the Japan, and they got taken apart in Tokyo by um, by New Zealand, and then France then beat them 52 points to 12 as well. So maybe they can keep the margin a bit closer with England, but I still think England have too much for them, and it's going to be a fairly comfortable England win. And as I said, it feels like England kind of need to do what Scotland have done with Finn Russell, in terms of making the game plan suit his style of play rather than the other way around. If you're going to go with someone like Marcus Smith at 10, and then in terms of Japan, they're not going to face the problems to have against New Zealand and South Africa, especially in terms of a superior pack in terms of power, etc. It's going to be more about fitness and being kind of on your toes as well in defence. So I expect Japan will catch them on the hop a few times, but I still think England are going to win that one. Okay, so that's the end of this one. Let me know, how you think your team is going to go down in the comments.